Welcome to the CHYE in partnership with COL Live K-Factor podcast with your host, Rabbi Yehoshua Wordy, director of CHYE. Each week we bring you interviews with amazing Jewish entrepreneurs sharing their challenges and successes. Their stories will inspire you to make the Keli to take your business aspirations to the next level. Okay, welcome back everybody. I'm very excited and honored to be sitting here in the beautiful offices of Encased in East Rutherford, New Jersey, together with businessman extraordinaire Akiva Isenberg, somebody who I know for many, many years, a fellow Morristonian, and I've had the zechus of watching him start his business and build his business, and Baruch Hashem, l'shem u'letiferes, and I'm very honored that he's agreed to take off some of his busy workday to be on the K-Factor podcast and to share some of his wisdom. So, in classic K-Factor style, just very quickly take us a little bit through your journey. You finished yeshiva, you finished semicha, and then where did you first end up in the world of business? What was your entry point?
So, I began finishing semicha. I was about 20 years old, and at that point, I really didn't have any clear direction. It was more about paying the bills, figuring out a way to pay for rent, and I tried actually many different things, including flipping burgers. That was for a few days. Didn't last long.
Oh yeah, which restaurant was that?
I worked on Coney Island Avenue there. Don't remember the name of the place.
At least you could take those skills, translate them into at home. You're good at flipping the burgers at home at least now.
Well, I remember that I was willing to try anything that could just open me up to figuring out what the world of business. And it actually wasn't the beginning. During the yeshiva years in general, I always looked for an opportunity to make an extra dollar, figure out a way to, work the system or work something that I can use to make a few extra dollars. If I'm thinking back to it now, I'd say it goes all the way back to the Cheder days, back in Morristown, as you mentioned. Great story, actually. We were finishing the year and going off to Montreal summer camp, overnight camp in Montreal. And we had this idea to bring some soda. And the year before, we had brought, for ourselves, me and my brother, we had brought like 200 cans. And we had extra, and we ended up selling them below the canteen's prices. I think we undercut them by like 25 cents. And it was American soda. When everyone else was selling a Canadian Coke, we had the real deal, the real Coke. The formula turns out to be slightly different. And we had moderate success by accident the first time, and that following year we decided to go all in. So that summer my father and another driver were taking up 2 vans from Morristown directly up to Montreal, and we had prepped, I think it was 1,400 cans of soda.
Wow. That
lined the entire floor of the van. The mothers weren't too pleased. Many of them deemed it a safety hazard, if I recall. And we were jammed in, but the entire 6 inches of floor space was dedicated towards these cans of soda. And I just remember unloading in overnight camp. Everyone was pulling out
made it past the border?
Yeah, I think they looked strangely at it. It wasn't illegal, so it did get through. But when we got there, everyone else pulling out a duffel bag or two, and we started unpacking, I think it was like 2 pallets worth if you count it up. And tried to put it behind the bunkhouse, thinking that somehow that would fly under the radar. Within I think it was a couple hours, the head counselor was on the radio, radioing into the canteen manager, wondering if this was going to be a problem. And they actually confiscated all the soda.
Oh my.
This was the first suspension of sorts, way before Amazon. And I remember they held on to it for a while, and there was a back and forth with the parents. And what ended up happening was they wanted a quote. So I mocked up some invoices, and we actually provided them a cost quote, which was higher than what we paid. It was my brother and I. And we actually ended up making a profit on it.
Oh.
So that was really, if I think back to it, that was I'd have to say that was the beginning of the entrepreneurial spirit at work.
It was deep in the DNA.
Yeah, that's that. I'd say that picked that as a beginning, but it kept going. Always
Nice.
looking for an opportunity.
So
to,
you started flipping burgers. That didn't last. What came next?
So eBay was still, I'd say, the dominant e-commerce force at that point, and that was I started working with another fellow from Morristown, just learning how to learning the ins and outs of selling on eBay, getting familiar with it. And that went well. At some point, I started doing it on my own.
Then was it a particular category you were selling, or were you just selling?
It was pretty broad. It touched on different categories. It was drop ship stuff. After a while, I wasn't going into the office. I started to do the drop shipping from the supplier and several suppliers. And when I got married, I believe I went to take a steady job. It's actually with my partner today. And that was doing cold outbound calls, which just didn't suit me. Felt like I was trying to sell things to people that they didn't want, just kind of groveling on the phone. And the outbound calls, there are those who are cut out for it. It wasn't my cup of tea. So I went back to doing it, go back to the e-commerce game, and it was eBay again at the time. And Amazon was rising as a force beyond eBay at the time. So that's when things started getting going. It wasn't all roses. It wasn't all just easy and smooth sailing. There was a point where I had to invest my own money. This was all personal. There was no partners or anything at the time, into buying inventory, and I'd really maxed out the credit cards and everything. And it was tough at that point. Not to get too detailed, but it really, there was a point where it was really end to end, and not all suppliers are honest. If you're a young kid hungry for a deal, sometimes there is easy vulnerability in that. Something worth remembering, that hunger can sometimes lead you to make poor choices, especially when credit cards are involved. And I'd say there was, I remember right about a year after getting married, there was a low point where things weren't working out. Baruch Hashem, I found the partner I'd worked for, that at the time wasn't my partner, and we had struck up a deal. So it was three of us, actually. He had a partner already. And he had been supplying stores with cell phone accessories, and I said, hey, I have this online expertise. I have some knowledge of how eBay or the e-commerce game works. So I set out to create that division of the company as a separate but sister company, and that's where it began. I'd say that's where the upward trend began at that point.
Comprende. So jumping right in and talking on a more broader level than a detailed level, a lot of people get into Amazon trying all sorts of different things and they sort of bang around until they come to some sort of focus, some sort of category that works for them. Tell us a little bit about how, your thoughts on how that works.
So I think nearly everybody I know that's played the e-commerce and Amazon game has started by scouting a deal, or many. And that classic phone call of what's the ASIN, what's the margin, where's my 20, as in where's my 20%. That definitely is the starting point, and maybe a necessary starting point for everyone to just learn the basic process of getting products listed online, FBA process. That's where I began as well. It's, I think, inevitable. You're going to look for kind of easy opportunities, way to get on board, and there's no shame in that. There's nothing wrong with starting where there's an opportunity. In fact, I think it's necessary. Grab the first thing that comes to you. At some point, though, we looked at the market and around the competitors as well, and realized the few products we had created, even at that point it was white label if I recall, were opportunities to create ownership over the value you create and some semblance of control, albeit in the market setting, which has volatility. You can control the outcome if you're invested in marketing and that sort of thing. So it slowly shifted. I wouldn't say it happened overnight, but it slowly shifted from being deals that were sourced and finding opportunity, some honest vendors, some not so scrupulous vendors that will look for an opportunity to do a few good transactions. The risk in that was obvious, and the need to sort of carve out, and my own personal desire to kind of create more stability and future and direction for the company. One was that to fixate on product where you can create value and continue to do so and leverage the success of yesterday to create ultimately a customer base if you do it well. And I wouldn't say at the beginning I was fixated on a customer base. You start by just giving one customer one product. If you have, right, all it takes is one product with one customer, and that's a sale. And that sort of grew. And there were key points, I'd say, along the way where a new partner, one of the original partners, exited and sold his share to a new member that joined. And there were key tipping points where we really solidified the direction towards investing not just white label at that point, but in manufacturing as well. One of the key reasons for manufacturing became the ability to provide the value that you see the customer's missing. If you're sourcing it, you are at the mercy of whatever's already on the shelf.
Right.
And sometimes that there's a product that needs to be better.
Right.
And when you can just make it, that's the best way to go.
Right. And so we're gonna track back to all of that in a second. But I want to jump into, 2 weeks ago we had our big e-commerce event, and we had a CEO panel, and there was a lot of discussion about Amazon and the future of e-commerce, and there was a lot of naysayers on the panel in terms of people casting their lot with Amazon. But on the other hand, there's the other voice that the Amazon is the growing behemoth, and it's year after year it's growing, and there's still opportunity. For give us your perspective on that, as somebody especially who's deeply enmeshed in the Amazon ecosystem. What do you see about that?
Well, you mentioned the event 2 weeks ago. First, I want to say thank you to Rabbi Wordy for all the amazing work you do to bring together entrepreneurs and people with what to share and people who need to hear it. That's an incredible service and a chesed you do for the community. I remember the Baal Asik was always your obsession. Going back to before CHYE existed, you would go to every office you could find.
Anyone that would let me in. Yeah.
Sicha.
Yeah.
Whatever it was they were willing to listen, whether it was 10 minutes or 30 minutes, you were there to provide it. So I just wanted to personally thank you for that. I think you're doing an incredible thing. It's a form of shlichus, which
yes,
it cuts across different lines. It's not geographic, but it comes down to the need is there. You had asked specifically about the focus on Amazon over potentially other platforms. I'd like to address that in two ways. First is about customer attention and the customer themselves. If the customers and Amazon are deeply enmeshed at this point, and that's only growing,
right,
I would have to ask, why would anybody in the right mind run the other way, away from the customer, essentially, which is where their pledge is, where their loyalty lies, for good reason. Amazon has done many things that other platforms haven't done and stepped up in ways that they've proven, unlike others that have just sort of, had the mantra of customer in mind, they've proven that they're actually there for the customer. To run the other way would just be short-sighted and, quite frankly, running away from the customer, not from Amazon. That's where the customers are, right?
Right.
That's the way I see it. There's, why would you go the other way? I can't really understand.
Okay, so I'm good with that. But one of the big points that they were making was that, Amazon is in it for themselves, and there's this risk that if you do a category very well, they'll step in and take over, so to say.
Well, I'm glad you asked that. Every business is in it for itself. But what Amazon has demonstrated time and time again is that itself, their interests and the customer interests are actually perfectly aligned. One of the reasons why I think it'll be tough to take them on when it comes to the legal issues and the size of as their company continues to grow is they have done nothing to show that they're not actually sticking by that philosophy that they tout, which is customer first. They continue to provide customers. So unlike a merger, say, of AT&T or Verizon, where the fear is that a merger will ultimately result in increased price for the customer, that is really the foundation for any kind of, bust up in the government stepping in. There is absolutely no reason that we've seen nothing that indicates that's what Amazon's for. Everything they've done, including the third-party availability on the site, demonstrates that may the best product for the customer win, and that it ends there. I do want to say, though, that the strategy of diversifying, if you're creating good products, and we're assuming here we're talking about products as an Amazon seller, it's not about the platform. If the focus is on the customer, as Amazon's is, as yours should be, then a great product can sell to the customer through any channel. It's a medium, right? It's the medium that gets the product to the customer. So if the same product, putting aside price points, if the same product were listed on eBay or Bonanza or Walmart or internationally, anywhere you put it, it's not the platform that matters so much. That happens to be where the customer's attention is. So it would be pretty foolish to look the other way.
Right.
But why wouldn't you engage in the other platforms as well? Because attention is everything, and Amazon doesn't have 100% of the customer attention. They're getting close, but they're not there. They're not there yet, right? So while you're doing that, I say that go for it, increase your presence on other platforms. Understand that if you began on Amazon, that you may be more reliant on the FBA model than you realize. The logistical challenges with actually handling inventory. Right. People don't even appreciate it. It's hard to sometimes realize what it's like to run an operations.
Right.
Many of us are just in the model of FBA. And if you're ready to embrace that and to make that work, then absolutely go for it. And more customers. It's really not about the platform. It's about the customer and your experience and their experience with your brand and your company. So go for it. The additional, the revenue won't hurt. Hopefully it won't deter your focus. You can stay focused on the product and the experience as a whole. So you can share things like assets and marketing. Strategy is shared throughout the platforms. You can leverage that. But trying to run from it, those doomsdayers and that whole Armageddon scenario, China's taking over, Amazon's taking over, where are we going to come at? Where are we going to surface? I think that comes from a place of, well, to be frank, the companies that failed to add value in the first place.
Uh-huh. So now that, since you're touching on the topic of adding value, I mean, now that you've had the advantage of being in business for multiple years, and to having a chance to work on your business, not just in your business, what wisdom would you share in terms of building an enduring and long-term business? What are the key elements that people should have in mind?
Well, that is a loaded question. It always starts with people. The products are going to be different tomorrow, definitely different in a year or 10 or whatever period of time. It is not about the product as much as it is about, I think, the core of what your company is. Some companies are obsessed with creating culture. I think culture is not something you form, or the people are not something you mold by reading a book or by hearing a podcast. It just is. It's like a relationship. I think if you define it, we all know those people that talk about the relationships are probably not fun to hang around. You'd rather talk about the things that are interesting, right? So it lives in the background. It's a living, breathing thing. And as you put more pieces in play, more people in play, it forms on its own.
Right.
And those people ultimately are what are going to form the backbone of your company for the future. If depending on what stage you're at, it's probably not stage 1 or 2. But as you begin to pick people up, I would say merging and bringing together people that believe in some of the same ideals that you do, and at the same time bring different skill sets to the table. So believing the same thing is crucial, but at the same time, you don't need to duplicate yourself. There's no reason.
Digging in on what you're saying, people that believe in what you do. So, in other words, what you're saying is that building a company, you have to build a compelling vision for your existence into who your company's DNA is if you're going to get people to buy into it. Explain a little bit about that.
So I just want to say that that's not stage 1, just because for those listening that may be looking for kind of an action item on their list to start the day with, I think you start by putting your head down and working hard and staying humble and learning. And thank you again, Rabbi Wordy, for being a facilitator of that. So time will go by before I think that becomes a relevant factor. And depending where you are, and there's a certain integrity, maybe mentorship can help, to look at where you stand in the life cycle of your company, about the right time for focus on the bigger picture. When the time does come, I'd say that focusing on building a team that is willing to endure the same hardships that you've had to deal with. And it's easy to forget sometimes that the people that come on board didn't have the same background you did. They may not have had the same struggles you did. So there is going to be a difference in the way they view the company. And I think that's inevitable, especially if they're employees and not owners. And it's about stringing together the key people. It doesn't need to be necessarily everyone that, voices the same ideals all the time. It's not, you're going to have different people, different personalities in the room, but you're looking for those common, I think, core traits that allow the team to kind of sync up and set their sights on a vision. And hopefully yours is a big one to make that possible. And hopefully it's not a short-term target either. I mean, we're hoping here that this is, that's what I would hope, that this is something enduring for many, many years to come, something that when you're done with it, and it can even be passed along even when you were not part of it, something that sustains. And to do that without people is impossible. It's just, it's the people that form the backbone of that dream. Okay.
So circling now back to something else you spoke about earlier in terms of building your own products, manufacturing your own products. There's nowadays the ability to do that has gotten easier and easier. Share with us a little bit about, wisdom in terms of doing that type of thing.
I love this question. I really do. And I'll tell you why. I think everybody thinks there's or not everybody, but there's a thought that says analytics, really kind of understanding the market, taking it apart the way an algorithm might, is kind of it's the core of success in an e-commerce era. And they're not entirely wrong. There's definitely the algorithms at play and definitely a huge part of it. What I think the right place for the focus would be, in 2 words, really creating value. What that means to me, and it means something different for every person, I think, in every stage, whatever company you're part of, whether it's a service industry or you're in product, is taking a look at the world around you and taking the outside view. And when you do that, I think you'll find that there's many things that you wish were done a little different. In your personal life, it could be the product you're using. It could be a can opener that doesn't work the way it's supposed to. It could be a better mousetrap, right? As the saying goes, it could really be anything. It could be a service that you think should be bundled with another service. It could be literally anything at all. And it should be something that you understand, something that comes from a place that you're not just sprouting ideas, but something that you have personally felt the pain point. And fact check yourself, check with a friend, check with people, see if your concern is real. Sometimes you'll find that it resonates with other people too. But this train of thought really is about focusing on where you personally, where you have the ability to add value. And I know we're not from a background of tikkun olam, but if you think about it in the big picture, that's really why we're all here. It's about adding value, and it's about doing something while you're here with your skills. The Eibishter gave you a certain set of skills, and it's about applying those skills. So, as the old saying goes, Zusha, why weren't you Zusha? That's the only fear that you'd have is why weren't you? You don't need to be somebody you're not. And if someone else is a better inventor, that's their path. And if somebody is keen on sales, they have value to add. Hopefully not in a conniving kind of way, but in a way of actually adding value where they can bring real, something the customer is missing, whether it's a product, whether it's just a new way of doing this. Sometimes it's placement. We've had products that succeeded that were literally about writing a different title because awareness and the customer buying something with confidence, knowing that a concern or potential fear factor was addressed, is already a source of, it's pleasing to them. And pleasing means I'm ready to go hit the buy box, that good old yellow buy box that everyone needs, that covets so much. So it's about understanding where and there's a certain amount of honesty and integrity and just kind of looking in the mirror and saying, what are my skills and strengths? And then that has to translate. That's only a starting point. At that point, you have to pivot. It's the philosophy is there, but it's then about action and saying, okay, what am I going to do to turn the things I'm good at into something actionable tasks, the things I'm actually going to execute on. And this is where I think the right partner, and enough can't be said for having a partner in business, I think, where the world is made up, Zachar and Akiva, and all the yin yang that the Eibishter created. You're not going to have everything it takes. There's a lot of pieces to the puzzle, and working with the people, especially when you have the opportunity, if your first few steps are successful, God willing, that allow you to bring something to the customer where even you come up short. So you have the perfect idea, but you just can't execute on, communicating with China or right. Whatever, or finance or whatever it might be, and finding someone that you can work with that complements what you have. That I believe is one of the recipes for something that can withstand the test of time, a company that can endure.
Very nice. So that's more on a macro level, but getting down to like a fine details, like if someone's listening to this and they have a certain product idea, run them through, based on your experience, what's the easiest way for somebody nowadays to try to, we get this in CHY a lot. We have a lot of people that walk in the door, they have like unique products that they want to create and it's in their head. Nowadays with in the Amazon world, what is the most direct and smooth process that someone could take to try to produce a product?
So a little trick that I think might help would be to put down your selling glasses, put down your perspective of a seller for a second. And with those glasses on, everything's needed. There's so many things to focus on. It gets complex. It gets messy. I think a guidepost, something that would be helpful as a kind of an anchor, would be turn all that off. Ask your wife, ask your husband, ask your neighbor. Watch them purchase something on Amazon. Watch yourself purchase something on Amazon. Turn all that off, right? You're a seller. It's hard to get out of that mindset. There's so many details to attend to. But when you buy something, if you can just get out of your brain for a second, try to watch, you'll see that there may be 5 or 6 key things you look for every time. And those things matter to you. And you weigh them. You create a little bit of a checklist in your head. Review count versus review quality versus legitimacy of the brand as you perceive it from the outside. The functions of the product versus and then of course the price, at what price. And those things come together to shape your buying process. It's not the only part, but it's one of the, I think that's a process we all use in some way or another. We all resort to that. Now, as a seller, it's easy to get lost in the multitude of details and what's the right strategy. There's so many options out there. Products, listing styles, advice, right? There's the advice which is conflicting and it's paralyzing. I think to turn all that off, turn down the volume and watch yourself or someone make a purchase. You'll see that there's always going to be compelling content. They're always going to opt for the product. When given the choice, they're always going to opt for the one that gives them a comfort that the product will perform. Mm-hmm. So review quality and quantity. Right. The social credibility that comes with reviews is very powerful that Amazon created. Hence the game, hence the desire to game it, which I don't recommend. So the way I think the way you might create some clarity there is to say, would I buy? Be honest. Put the search term in and say, here's a step-by-step. Take your search term. That's a valuable piece of information right there. How do people find this? Amazon is the hottest lead site in the world. There's no higher conversion rate. I believe last I checked, it was 74% for Prime members.
Wow.
It's unheard of, right? It's unheard of in e-commerce. It's impossible. And they're at 74% for a customer who comes onto the site with intent to buy and enter something into the search bar. It's compelling. So that demonstrates, call it the market size. I'm going to go through step one. You have 30,000, let's say, searches per month with a given phrase. That phrase represents intent and really a pain point, or pain or pleasure. There's the only two motivators for any sales, pain or pleasure. Just use the pain example. So they have a pain point they need to solve. Then the next question is, how many times were you seen? So there's the impressions. Impressions are obviously better. You get more of those on page 1. And it's cyclical. It's going to come back to you, and you'll see in a minute. Then once they see you on the page of 20, so there was a capability of being clicked, then there is the CTR. There's how many people actually took that action. Then they've developed a slight interest, you might say, on your product. You entered the realm, you're in the running, right? So your product's in the running. Then comes conversion time. That's about sales, the copy, the power of your message, the power of your content, visual content, right? Text content. And when they convert, in the final stage, when they convert, you take your selling price minus fees equals profit. Now, it all sounds so very straightforward. It actually is. And I'll tell you why. The algorithm's getting smarter every day. I know there was a period where many sellers, there's a lot of shiny stuff. And by that, I mean, people were able to game the system and see success overnight, like they always you hear on the ads, Facebook ads probably following you around, saying, overnight success to a listing or that kind of thing. Well, my humble opinion, the shortcuts to listing success are also a shortcut to account suspension, number one. And number two is that on the bigger picture, I think Amazon is always perfecting, and AI, artificial intelligence, now is playing a role in how the algorithm sorts the information, in really just getting out of the way of the customer, of the process of buying, and letting the customer opinion in mass, the opinion of everyone shines through as what is the best product. So whereas it may look like a different game, the business may look like a completely different landscape than it was 30 years ago, I think the fundamentals are exactly the same. Uh-huh. It's about strong value and about understanding what you bring to that particular. It's a one-on-one transaction. As many data points, billions of data points, it comes down to the product that you put together and crafted. Was that perfect for the customer who found you?
So let me ask you, if you'd be comfortable sharing, is there any particular product that you brought to market that you're proud of in terms of that?
Tough question. So I'll tell you this. We just launched a Indiegogo campaign for the audio mod. That's a battery case. Those are around already. What we looked to do was bring something new to the iPhone user that they didn't have before.
Right.
And as someone who's always looking to bring value to someone who might be missing, sometimes a big company which cuts a feature, let's say like a headphone jack, that seems like a perfect opportunity to bring back something that the customer wanted, or they would have opted and said, I'd actually like to have the choice to either have it or not, but let me pick it. And Apple, of course, decided that it was in their best interest, for whatever reason, to delete that feature. So we just launched on Indiegogo this campaign and we just got funded, I think, yesterday, to a case that brings both the battery power, but as well as a headphone jack back to the iPhone 7, 8, 8 Plus, and the X. So that's it's been a new journey, new stage for us, because Amazon has been the focus, but it's actually been a lot of fun.
And that came through identifying a pain point.
Yeah, it's something I'd say that's one of the areas of my contribution, and it's something that I actually enjoy a lot, which is just looking at the world or at the landscape of product that's currently servicing the customer's needs, and saying, hey, what's missing? What can the person still use? What hasn't been addressed yet? Sometimes I know Chaim Pekarsky mentioned the review reading process. It's definitely on point. It's one way to do it. It's one of several ways to do it. And just realizing what's missing. Right. And this applies to, I'm sure it's beyond product. It applies to services as well. Right. Sometimes the same service has been provided in the service industry the same way over and over again, financial or whatnot. And sometimes the company to step out is the one to just look at it broader and say, what's the customer really want? How do we add to this experience? Like, what can we bring more that just hasn't been brought before? And once you do that, you create a framework where it's no longer about what the customer literally asked for. I think the best way to do it is to identify with what the customer really wants. And that sounds like a tall order, but I think it's not if you talk to people, if you actually just get a sense of what they're actually looking for.
Right.
And then that's where I believe the best innovations come from. And look at the biggest startups. I mean, they really come from Warby Parker was just one I just over another podcast describing their transition through, not finding glasses at a reasonable price and saying, why are we paying the same price for iPhone and glasses? Doesn't make any sense. And and that friction point led them to saying, there's got to be a better way, right? That classic phrase, there's got to be a better way. So that train of thought is something that I think, instead of sitting down in a brainstorming session, okay, what are we going to think of today? It's more from a place of experience and actual experiencing that issue, or it's something you experience at home. And they're all over the place. I mean, there's 101 ways to.
So zooming in now, just very quickly though, we talk again more and more macro, but for a lot of people listening, actually bringing a product to market, nowadays, how do you prototype? How do you find a manufacturer? In a very, very quick way, just share with people, just so that the people listening might be able to, if they have an idea how they can actually go about making it happen. What are those steps that have to, I know nowadays you have a lot of stuff in-house, but if someone doesn't have that luxury, what do they do?
So the first step would be identifying the customer.
Right.
The way I would do that would be use the search term that you would naturally use, or that poll 10 people around you and see the terms they would naturally use. What you'll end up with is the most ordinary and average term. Average is a powerful word. It's at work every day. And you'll find the term that represents the category at its broadest. And then from there, it works out to long tails as people add specific requests. Once you do that, you'll see the products that are currently servicing that demand. So you have, like we said, a pain point, and then you're going to see a list of 20 solutions, quote unquote, solutions to that pain point. Now, there's no room for optimism here. This is the cold part, where you say, here's the average price point. Customers are reacting well to the budget option, and the algorithm, again, is just voicing customer opinion, so put that aside. And the results are actually facts. It's gravity. Don't justify it. Don't answer it. You don't have to logic your way why they would. This is not about innovation, about the next big thing. This is about an existing pain point with existing solutions and your idea for something that might be better. If you can't, in a sentence or two, describe why someone or why you would buy your product, you're probably doing something wrong. You won't have
so
that
let's
kind
say
of
you
success.
make that decision, though, that you're ready to buy that product, and now you have to manufacture it. So what is a beginner, a novice, what would a novice do now to try to get their product manufactured?
So I have the luxury of having partners that are the exactly where I said strengths and weaknesses. I do have partners that deal with that side of the business. So I do know that there are now services, even you can network them, that provide the sourcing opportunities once their ideas are locked in.
Right.
So my side, and the part that I can share just from experience, is more about the value proposition and how you'd go about vetting an idea, not just a theory idea, but now once it comes down to sourcing, I think you have to measure up, take those critical eye and ask and try to be objective. And this is crucial. Do you want the product that you're looking at? You brought in, let's say, 10 samples from China. Do you want to believe it's great? Or if you handed it to someone in a blind taste test, they would agree with you.
Right.
You can't cheat your way out of that. Now, I know that there have been those who believe that the system can be gamed and that's part of their strategy. I believe that the internet as a whole, and Amazon for sure, lives every day to create trust. That's literally the basis of the platform, and everything rides on the trust factor for them. So they're working tirelessly with their big guns against your little methods to try to undermine trust. Trust would mean taking a product that deserves a 3-star rating and jacking it up to 4.5. That's trust.
Right.
So you can try, and you might win temporarily, and you might see meet someone who's told you that it worked. But I would hope that you have the patience to run through that process, and it does take more time, and not necessarily more money. I think sometimes in place of money, effort is the winner when it comes to being honest, vetting your products carefully, maintaining that quality. And then they shouldn't stop there. I think the next step would be making sure that no part of the process was cheap to you. I think some of the strategies revolve around massive quantity. And what gets lost in the process is the fact that one customer wanted one great experience. And that literally is the building block for millions of transactions. And asking, is this a premium listing experience? Don't even stop at the listing. How do they feel when they unbox the product? Maybe an element of surprise, maybe a beautiful card, maybe a handwritten card where, it says, thank you so much for buying it. We hope you leave a review. That would take you from, an average of 4-star to 4.7, 4.8 stars, which is the difference maker, not just in sales, but in margin as well. Wouldn't you pay more for a product that was rated 4.7, that assurance that comes with that?
Right.
Believe it or not, the quality of the two products were exactly the same, but one company took the effort to just get you interested. Look, we live in an age when talk is cheap and everything comes quickly. If you just slow it down for a bit and get someone's attention by doing something genuine, maybe something vulnerable, something they didn't expect, just a little something. It doesn't have to be big, and it definitely doesn't have to be expensive. But it takes intent, it takes slowing down and really bringing, and to me, the kind of foundation to that is value and that experience that you say, what does this one customer have? What's his experience with my company? And I hope you run customer service the same way.
Nice. Very nice. So I'm going to shift gears now in the little bit of time we have left in this conversation. Is there any story of Kiddush Hashem or Hashgacha Pratis in all your years in business that sticks out in your mind?
Good question. Let me think. The path, I'd say as a whole, this would be just the path taken. None of these things were intentional. I think we all sort of think as big brands and the companies we respect as having kind of masterminded the perfect solution. The Eibishter has a path somehow that just, you only find it. We can only live in the moment, right? The past is history, the future is a mystery. You can't know. It's impossible. You can only act on the information you have. And looking back, I think there were these crucial moments, things that appeared to be bad, a partnership that didn't work out. Sometimes even things like suspensions, sometimes things that just force you to wake up and they can look, really negative at the moment. And they force you to look at the big picture and to kind of plan for the future, hopefully if your eyes are open. And you get stronger and you get better and you start to see the big picture. And I really am thankful for for my wife, actually, who gets me out of the house every morning when I linger. She, shout out Chaya, she makes sure that I'm on the way to work. She wants to make sure. So and that too, right? When it comes to finding a shidduch, it's the little steps I think that just form who you become, and that's one of the reasons I struggle with regret. I know one of those things that some people are burdened by, and it's maybe some of it's genetic, but it's one of those things that there's really no gain from looking backwards. Includes, by the way, in the bad product you bought, reinvesting in marketing. If it's a terrible product, don't do it. It's not about yesterday. It's about what opportunities you have today.
Nice. Let me ask you like this. Are there any particular business books that you would want to recommend for people listening to read that will open their eyes in the world of business?
Sure. Start with Simon Sinek. He has a book, Start With Why. It's foundational. I think it's a very different approach to thinking about value and thinking about how companies, or people for that matter, connect with other people. His basic paradigm shift is that we don't really make decisions with our brain. We make decisions with he calls it the limbic brain. It's the almost animalistic side of our behavior. And it turns out it's motivated by things we can't even tap into so well. We can't describe why we opted for this product or that product. We don't know. Why an iPhone? Why can Apple do 100 things we don't like and we still keep buying those iPhones? And it's because we connect with something like that classic 1984 commercial. There's something just that they do differently, something different. But what is that different? You couldn't even say. So that really is kind of, I think, a really broad, kind of fundamental book that covers that. And then there are some specific ones that I have an academic obsession with. I love to get into the brain sometimes, see how people think. There's Daniel Kahneman.
And what's the name of the book?
Let me just remember that one. Thinking Fast and Slow. It's an incredible insight into the human mind. We think we're rational beings, and our thought process, we like to pride ourselves on intellect, and once you realize how flawed some of the decisions we make, but foundationally, not because we're doing it wrong, we just don't operate that way. We have so many other driving forces. So it just forces you to when you read this kind of stuff, it doesn't change you overnight, but I think it gives a perspective on your own thought process. It's I think they call it nowadays meta. And it gets you out of your own head a little bit so you can see where you are actually being rational and, applying good practices, and where sometimes you are doing things from gut. I hope everyone's seen Moneyball, that the on-base percentage is everything. Sometimes there's a very different way to achieving something, and it's not, the intuition can lead you really wrong really fast in the wrong environment. It's good for some things. Intuition is great for, avoiding a car crash. It's really bad for making big financial decisions. So that kind of stuff is just an obsession I have because it's really, and anything by Jim Collins, quite frankly, he writes amazing stuff as well.
Let me ask you the following. Work-life ruchnius balance. As a business person that has to, be responsible for a business, what's your strategy to balancing the great balancing act?
The $1 million question. It's tough. It's something that requires, I think, constant effort. If you are passionate about what you do, it's something that you just want to be at work. Sometimes you want to get dragged in, and your entire, not just physically, but I think your entire being gets wrapped up in it. And we're multifaceted. I think we have priorities sometimes that can conflict, and it's important to take a step back, and it takes a lot of discipline, I think, to be able to enact that when you're somewhere being present, whether it's with your children, with your wife, turning off the TV included. It's something that takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of work, and it's an ongoing thing. I don't think there's a magic bullet here when it comes to the balance. I think it's just about, by being present, you can maximize the time when you're doing something. It works for your work too. How many people respond to emails all day, and by the time they're done reacting to every fire and every incident, the day's over and they didn't accomplish what they wanted to do. So I think we can all benefit from it. I'm no time management guru, but it's worth studying up on that as well.
So here's the final question. Let's say I took you right now and I put you in front of yourself 10 years ago. What do you want to tell yourself that would, what's that business wisdom you want to share with the early stage you to put you on the right path? What's that wisdom you'd share with a new entrepreneur?
I'd say to not remove the fear factor. I think fear has its place, but I think the old saying goes, courage is action in the face of fear. Sometimes the unknown can hold people back. I think it does often. It's jumping in sometimes without the answers, and then being wise enough to look for answers on the fly. So I know we all know optimists, and we all know, super critical people. Rarely do you find the skills brought together of optimism with a fair dose of paranoia, for lack of a better word. Those two things together can be a very, very powerful force, and I think it's worth investing in, whether it's with a mentor, whether it's by acquiring more knowledge and just making that part of your weekly routine to read more. It can balance you out, and it's something that you don't have to work tirelessly every day just to stay above water. There are ways to get ahead. Thanks to Rabbi Wordy, there's resources to help get ahead. He can help. There's an abundance of resources, right? What do you provide?
Yeah, CHYE, we're here to be a resource. Anyone's ready to start a business, we have our business counselor, we have our business mentors, and all of our programming. So is there a final word you want to say before we sign off?
Sure. I will say many people, there's this talk about an exit strategy. I know startups have a lot of glitz and glam, and the word an exit strategy is tossed around like it's something to be achieved. I haven't been around long enough to be an authority on the subject, but I think instead of building an exit strategy or building a company to sell, I think it's worth building a company worth selling. That's what I think.
Nice. That's very, you're a man of deep business wisdom, Akiva. Thank you very much for sharing and for taking off your time. I hope all of the listeners have been enjoying this. Everyone have a wonderful week. Michael Al-Chayil. We'll see you again next week. 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 In partnership with COL Live, K-Factor Podcast, with your host, Rabbi Yehoshua Wordy. We look forward to bringing you more amazing entrepreneurs to share their stories. See you next week.